Welcome to the Airbnb Blueprint Podcast, your go-to training hub for building your very own Airbnb business. In each episode, we break down the exact blueprint that helps us build a multi-six-figure Airbnb business from scratch, and we'll show you how to do the same. Continue learning with us for free in the Airbnb Blueprint coaching community on Facebook. Find the link in our show notes below. Commit, believe, succeed. Let's go. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Thanks for joining.
Still here.
Still here.
Still here.
Like a bad smell. Always there. Always hanging around. I want to talk about something that we've both got experience with, and I think a lot of people listening might have as well. And it's a serious thing. It's kind of somewhat connected to something that we've touched on in previous episodes about the online world now, and everybody's selling a course on this and that. Yes, we do have a training course, but you want to speak to anyone who's worked with us, and I'm sure they'll have nothing but good things to say.
This is about the shiny pennies.
The shiny penny syndrome.
Which we also fell for it.
If this episode can save one person from very quickly chewing through their life savings by blowing it on 10 different training courses, trying to do 10 different things with 10 different training providers, then it's worth putting out there because I've done it. You've done it.
Yeah.
We've spent huge amounts of money. We know endless amounts of people that have done it that have huge regrets that if they could go back in time would do it about as different as you possibly could do. I mean, if I was really to sit there and think in detail about the amount of money I've spent with some of the people that I've spent it with, like I would genuinely go into a pretty deep depression because I think back and I think, how could I have been so stupid? How could I have been duped so easily and bought into such utter bullshit and happily given that person like 10, 15, 20,000 pounds for something that was never even real. It was just a complete smokescreen, but it's happened and there's no way of getting that money back. There's no comeback. There's no, unless you want to end up taking these people to court. I mean, who's got the time or the energy or the money to do that? So you basically end up just, being burnt and walking away pissed off. But the crazy thing is that you can so easily do it again and again and again because it's almost like it starts to feed itself. You spend 15 grand here, you do this for a little bit, it doesn't work out, the support was never actually there, nothing that was promised was actually there. And then you're like, shit, okay, I've lost my money there. Okay, that was a bad experience, but now I'm a little bit more desperate. My little pot's gone down, I still hate the job. I've still got the mortgage rates are going up. I've still got the car payments to make. So now I'm going to start looking at this. This looks good. Maybe this is better. Maybe this is the way to go. Why didn't I do this in the first place? And then you put some money into that. And then, the circle kind of goes. And, we see it, we know people that kind of flip flop and, do this for a few weeks and that for a few months, and maybe that for a year or two, and then moving all over the place. And it is this shiny penny syndrome. It's just so easy to fall into, right? So what's some of the things, like what's some of your advice with hindsight now that we've kind of been around the circuit for a little bit and we've invested money and we've had bad experiences and some good experiences, but I think we could both agree that we're now, now that we're in the space where we're trying to provide that real value and come from a real ethical place based on all of the bad experiences that we've had, and now saying, okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to do the opposite, and we're actually going to give what we say we're going to give. Like with hindsight, what would you do different for people that are now just starting to look around at what's out there?
It's a very tricky question, I have to say.
Yeah.
It's a very hard question to answer because if I were to look back and ask myself, would I do that again? If I had a choice, if I had known the future, of course not, I wouldn't have done it. But it was the situation at that time that was pressing me to take the action.
Right.
And maybe we talk about like some courses. some strategies, let's say, that, I got, say personally, like for me, I got involved very early, quickly in the game. The very first one that I was interested into was all the creative strategies. So that was my very first one. Let's say how to buy a house for £1, how to do all the creative deals, lease options, vendor finance, installment contracts, those kind of thing. That attracts me because even though I had money in the bank, but it was my ego that was talking most of the time. Because I'm like, no, I can buy a house for £1, and that's kind of stuck in my head. And when I try to go out and then trying to make every single deal work just for £1, it turned out to be a disaster. Like I don't know how much money I lost in that part.
Making all the mistakes and disasters and all the rest of it. But also, if you're listening to this and you're in a position where you want to get moving fast, right, and start making money fast, like what we spoke about in the last episode, I'm not saying lease options, people have phenomenal success with lease options. We've done lease options in the past. It is a real strategy, and it's an incredibly powerful strategy, and it's real. But I've said it before, you're not going to see money quick, right? These deals take time, dealing with solicitors and, all that stuff, raising, money potentially at some point down the road. You still need to be able to exercise that option, right? So you do still need that money, however you're doing the deal. But you also need to be a certain kind of person, right? You need to have the character traits to be able to confidently walk into an agent and deliver a crystal clear pitch confidently and knowledgeable, and have charisma and confidence and all these kind of things. And, some people might disagree and say, oh, you can learn, it will come with confidence. I don't believe it will come with time and education. I don't think it will. I think you're either that person or you're not. And if you're not a deal maker, if you're not someone who can walk into a room and hold fluent conversation with a stranger and, just have that something, then I think you're going to struggle in that world. I really do. I don't think that's something that you can learn.
I remember somebody said to us before as well that, just remember the script, have the script, and the script doesn't work. Because when somebody asks you, when they jump the script, you'll be like, oh,
yeah.
And then it was an awkward silence,
The question's not on here.
Yeah, it's not on there. So, yeah. But I think, all these, let's say, for example, the creative strategies, it's a great tool to be used at the right time. Yeah,
and to bolt on, to have the knowledge around it and know when to pull it out of your pocket, but not to lean on and rely on the whole time.
Yeah.
But it's going to take time. You are going to still need money at some point, and you're not going to make money quickly. But I think what I would say, and where I believe I went wrong at the beginning, was I never really sat down and thought, how do I want my life to look? I went straight to, okay, what are people talking about? What seems to be working? What's the hot, sexy thing? And for me, my first thing was, HMOs. I was like, I'm just going to build that's where we first met. I'm just going to build a HMO portfolio. And
that was rent to HMOs.
Starting rent to HMO without any thought about, okay, well, is this going to allow me to live the life that I want, which is being in Spain, having flexibility, having freedom, being able to make money from pretty much anywhere. And it really wasn't, maybe in time there was a chance, maybe in over a period of, probably 5 to 10 years, you could potentially create a portfolio and then outsource all the management and, hopefully not have too many problems. And maybe it could come a little bit passive.
I think the thing is whether you come into rent, let's say rent to HMOs or rent to service accommodations, essentially you are becoming like an estate agencies anyway. So if somebody were to be talking like, oh, I'm going to take on the rent to HMOs, and then it's going to be extremely passive to me because I'm going to pass it to another management company to deal all everything for you, well, there won't be any money left.
Exactly.
The deal is not going to stack.
How do you get past this problem of when you don't know the questions to ask, or when you don't know the information, how do you ask the right questions? You know what I mean? I think a lot of it comes back to that. And for example, like the online world, we both did all of our training where the seed was initially sown from an online ad that we saw, right? Everyone ends up handing over their life savings or swiping a credit card based on an ad that they see somewhere.
Which in some way is a funnel.
I think one of my biggest takeaways is now that we're kind of somewhat in that world and we're trying to deliver, coaching and training and support through our programs around selling these Airbnb deals and building a business that way, is I now know how it works, and I now know how I saw that ad, and I now know that all of the people that after I saw that ad and clicked on it started, all of those people following that ad that started popping up on my feed, reinforcing what I was starting to think about maybe potentially buying into this course, that were now also telling me, man, I went on that course, the best money I ever spent, these were my results. Now I know that they were just paid affiliates, right? Things like this, they were getting a kickback and a commission from reinforcing this idea that I was having about maybe going on this course. So I think I would say, as hard as it is, because it is so clever the way that it's kind of marketed now. And if you're not in the world, you don't really know what's happening. You don't know why you're seeing these things and why these people are reinforcing these ideas that you're having. I would say to do your very best to look through that, try and educate yourself in a way that doesn't cost lots of money to begin with. Get enough information where you can then go to that potential trainer or that potential company and say, okay, I'm interested, but I've got some really detailed questions that I need answers to before I'm willing to sign. Because I sure as shit didn't do that.
Yep.
Like I saw an ad, and then the next thing I knew, I was getting all these testimonials popping up saying, oh, I did this course, it was great. And then, next thing you know, I'm signing.
But is that because, is it like a FOMO thing? Fear of missing out?
Yeah, it's probably a big part of it.
Yeah.
We're like sheep, right? Wherever the most people go, you think that's got to be the best thing. Even though you see them people coming out the other end saying, well, shit, that was pretty average.
But I mean, I do, I have to say, like, I do know some people who are providing like really top-notch training for a very decent price as well.
Yeah.
And there are people out there, good people out there.
There are, absolutely.
To do your due diligence properly and not to jump the gun too soon.
What this episode is really about is not jumping between trying this for 6 months, doing that for a year. Because that, again, that's, I've done that, you've done a bit of that. And, you end up becoming, what's the term? Like a jack of trades, master of none. They know a little bit about lease options, bit about creative this, and a little bit of HMOs and da-da-da. And you end up actually not really achieving anything. If you say, I'm going to do this, and you just stay on that one path, whether it gets good or bad, hard, you have success, you have some failures, just keep going in that one direction, and there is a very high probability that you will get there. Rather than just, well, things get a little bit difficult, so now I'm going to jump out and get into something else.
Yeah. I think the reason that we, I like to say, like, we made it in service accommodation world is because we actually stick to it for a long, long time. There were some bad years, there were some bad months, but we just kept our head down, keep going. And then new opportunities open the door, So that's probably the reason why that we kind of came out this way. But like with the let's say, for example, the creative strategies, we were doing a lot of direct marketing, but that burned the budget so quick. Like say the ugly boards, the yellow boards that you put it up to different like lampposts, different, and you flood the whole town with all the yellow ugly boards. And that worked in some way that it brings you leads, but it didn't bring good quality leads, and then sometimes it didn't last a day. That people, what I found out was that it's not the council that took actions, but you have a responsibility to keep the town clean, yes, but you ended up doing all these ugly boards because somebody else taught it that so that's quite the first thing. Like, to me now, when I'm looking back, that's not ethical. That's quite a selfish thing to do. Second thing is probably the utility companies that goes around, to do a lot of maintenance. They see this board, took them down.
Yeah, of course.
And then you burn your budget so quick, you couldn't.
Going back to the whole sheep thing, how we just like, is it sheep or cow? It's just like, just like following the masses. If you're sitting in a room with 100 other people doing a 3-day course, let's say, right, which is the common, it's always 3 days, and remember that course is probably happening on a weekly basis, right, or every couple of weeks. there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people walking out of there all doing the exact same thing. Is that really a clever thing to do? Maybe one part of your brain says, well, it must be working. That's why there's so many people here. But then you've also got to think, well, that means that the competition, is through the roof. So that's a consideration as well. Like now when I see on the groups and stuff, because it goes right back to when we did that first HMO bit of training years ago, and they was telling us, to go out and do your direct to landlord marketing and your nice pretty envelopes and, post them out and now when I see that, and you see someone on their first day, take a picture of themselves by the post box with the letters like, hey guys, here I am. Letters are going out. Let's see what happens. Well, I can tell you what's going to happen. Fuck all. Because 50 people just sent the same letters. All right, maybe you might get one response, but it's going to be an absolute flea pit that's about to fall down. The guy can't rent it and he's looking for some muppet to come along, right, and take it off and deal with all of his problems. So it's like, what do you want to get into? It's got to be a little bit different. It's got to be a little bit unique. It can't be following the masses.
Like with HMOs, I mean, this is something that's always like intrigued me because let's say we talk about the market or the clients that are going to be staying at the property, right? The tenants that are going to be staying at the property. These aren't going to be the people that are well off to begin with, because if they are well off, would you be sharing a room, multiple rooms with other people? I would say no. No. So it's. And you can say, oh, but I'm creating a co-living space. It's
the same thing.
So if you have a lot of money,
put up some plants though.
Yeah, I mean, if you are quite, I personally wouldn't share with anyone.
No.
So the market that you're looking at is pretty much like capped to some degrees. I don't like to discriminate people, but you are pretty much capped between like a blue collar workers, or maybe to the lower grade of corporate level, I would say.
Yeah.
So, and these people don't look after the property. So if you buy a property, right, and you put so much money inject into it because you're hoping for capital appreciation, when you force appreciated it, which it would happen, if you convert 3 beds into 6 beds, it would go up. So you get some money back. But if these people don't look after your property, which they wouldn't, the cash flow will be super tight because rising energy costs and everything, right? You're going to have a tenancy headaches. And then at the end, let's say after a year or two, you're going to have to do full refurb again.
Yeah, I've never understood that business model. When you see the pictures of these, huge refurbs, and they look absolutely stunning.
Absolutely
with all the throw pillows and the feature walls and
it wouldn't last a year.
You think, man, I wouldn't be able to watch. I wouldn't be able to do that.
No.
It's bad enough doing like Airbnbs. You pour your heart and soul into that, and then you see them slowly get destroyed. But HMOs is a whole different level. And then the other thing, everyone's jumping on I'm just going to go straight off and be a property developer. Yeah, some people might make it work. 99% of people, it's not going to work. You're never going to get a deal. I've spoken about this on the podcast before. We've had developers coming on, and I'd interview them and stuff. And something else that, I've dabbled in, trying to do developments and stuff like that. And I went to view some deals, and, you're competing against, I remember, one of the guests that we had on who was a property developer, and I made a joke about, I walked out of this big nursing home, that was for sale, that would have been great for to turn it into a huge HMO. And literally there was a line of Range Rovers like down the street with developers with bags of cash, like they've already got connections in the council. They know they're going to get the planning. Good luck competing with that, when you don't know anything and you've just done a 3-day course.
I think it's good to start small and then just kind of slowly work your way up. It's the same thing, isn't it? Like, if you're trying to jump the gun too soon.
But you're selling a dream.
Yeah.
Become a property developer. One project can change your life. This could be you in the Lamborghini, But the person selling the course, they've been doing that for the last 20 years. They were a bricklayer for 10 years. And then they started their own construction team, and then they did a little flip, and then, so it's taken them 20 years to get to where they are. And then they're selling a course you can do it in 3 days. So this is all the stuff that you just learn over time. You start to see through it. But trying to explain this and give this information to someone who's just brand new, it's very, very difficult. And it's almost impossible to not just get tripped over along the way and learn by getting burnt.
I remember like when I walked out from the 3 days course, any programs at all, like my energy was like through the roof. I was ready to conquer the world. Like I'm ready to take on any deals at all until reality kicks in.
Yeah.
And then you're like,
I think the biggest thing that like opened my eyes, I mean, my eyes were already open to this whole world, which is quite dark. But you've said it before on the podcast, we did our training at the same place, not saying any names. And then you get asked to be a mentor. You didn't want it because why would you build your own business?
It didn't align with what we wanted to do.
No, we start getting messages from other mentors at this place, right? Asking very, very, very basic questions. How do I do this? How do you do that? How should this work? What should that contract look like? And then they're going back and they're mentoring, people who are paying £10,000-15,000 for the course. That's not right.
Yeah. Like what can we say, right? So,
well, it's just, it is what it is. But yeah, but look, the main takeaway from this, all I'm saying is, in my opinion, day one, sit down. How do I want my life to look, right? In the next 10, 15, 20 years, do I want to be here? Do I want to be there? Do I want to be able to move around? Am I happy here? Am I willing to go to a site every day? Stuff like that, basic stuff. How do I want my life to look? And then, what kind of strategies fit that? And what am I most passionate about? What do you have a passion for? Because you can't just do it because you think you're going to make loads of money. It's not going to work. You need to have some passion for it.
Yeah. I mean, let's say, for example, service accommodations, you're going to have like the customer service oriented mind. You want to be serving other people, and that's the attitude that you must have. If you don't have that thing, right, coming into hospitality sector is going to be a killer.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good example. If you don't like dealing with people, don't touch SA.
Yep. And if you want to get into, say, development, right, you need to love like that part
and be able to handle a shitload of stress.
Yep. So it's gonna have to fit or what you like to do. If you only have like, I'm gonna make money, you're not gonna make it. So because when the hard day comes up, you're not gonna go through with it. So
so have a passion for it, and then just stay on that one path. No matter how hard it gets, you got to commit to it and don't waver from it, because the temptation is going to come up, right?
Yeah,
it always does.
Something else. So you see success on, other success stories on social medias by other people, and you'll be like, oh, maybe I could do that too.
If only I'd have done that. Even now, I still say, I said, it's you just coming here. Maybe if we'd have done this, that would have been different. It's like, no. We made our decision and here we are, and it's going well. So nothing more to say on that subject, but do your due diligence, guys, and just don't chase the shiny penny. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for listening to another episode, and we'll see you next week on another episode of the Airbnb Blueprint Podcast. See you then.